In this clip, we're going to learn how to create a blend transition between two different animations inside of Maya's time editor. All right, so we're going to pick up right where we left off in the previous clip, and we imported both the idle animation clip and the run cycle animation clip. So let's go ahead and go up here to Windows, Animation Editor, and let's bring up the Time Editor, and you can see where we left off in the previous clip. So we have the idle animation playing first, and then we have the run cycle right after that. But you can see that we're getting a really harsh transition between these two clips. Basically, once it gets to the end of the idle clip, it's going to pop directly into the first pose or first keyframe of that run cycle. So this gives us a really bad pop between these two clips and just a really bad transition overall. It's not smooth at all, and it just doesn't really look appealing. So let's go ahead and go over the process of how we can actually smooth this out and create more of a blend between these two animation clips. So the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're actually just going to select the run clip here, and we're just going to click and drag it to the same track that the idle animation clip is on. So it's right up in line with the idle animation. And now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to expand the run cycle. So currently it's only about 2 steps, but we're just going to go ahead and loop this to the rest of our timeline. So let's go ahead and select the loop mode here. And then we want to make sure we hover our mouse over the end of the clip until we see that loop icon appear there. And then we'll go ahead and just click and drag all the way out. And currently we have 120 frames viewable on our timeline. So we'll go ahead and just drag it to the end. And you can see that that's created a nice perfect loop animation for our run cycle. So it's no longer just 2 steps, and it continues all the way up to frame 120. All right, so let's go ahead and now blend between these two animation clips and get rid of this really bad pop in the animation. So to do that, all we need to do is simply select our run clip, click and drag it until it snaps on top of the idle clip. And as soon as we do that and we drag it to the left, you can see we get this line that's kind of cut through, and that's just indicating that we're now blending between these two animation clips. So if we go ahead and just commit that, maybe right around there to see how that looks, let's go ahead and take a look at what happened now. So if we scrub this animation, you can see that there's more of a blend happening between the two clips. It's no longer a harsh pop. What's going on now is that Maya is trying to figure out the best way to actually blend between these two animation clips and create more of a smooth transition. So you can see by doing that, it's now created several poses in between there to try to blend between the two clips. So if we play this, you can see there is a much less of a popping motion as it plays through there. So there's more of an actual blending happening between these two animation clips. And if we want to extend the amount that the blend is happening, all we need to do is drag this clip even further above the idle. So as we drag that out, you can see that line cut through there. So if we maybe drag it further, now you can see the blend happens at around frame 16 now. So it starts that blending motion into the run. So we're getting an even smoother transition with even less of a pop there. So if we go ahead and play it, now you can see the motion that we're getting, and you can see how fast we were able to create a transition. You can see that Maya does a pretty decent job for us of figuring out how it can transition between these two separate animation clips to create more of a smooth sequence for us. Now, one really important thing that I want to mention about the time editor is that this is something you're typically not going to use a whole lot in a production environment as an animator, simply because you want to make sure that you're doing most of the legwork in order to get an animation looking exactly how you want. Because currently what's happening is Maya is simply figuring out sort of the most logical or mathematical way of transitioning between these two animation clips. It's not thinking about believability, it's not thinking about body mechanics and how the human body would actually transition from an idle state like this into a run. How is the body going to gather that energy to build up into this run cycle? Instead, Maya is simply looking at what is the most direct and linear path from the idle animation into the run cycle. And this is the result that we get here. Now it is producing pretty decent results, and you can see that it only took 1 or 2 clicks to achieve a decent looking transition. But more often than not, if someone like your director or supervisor went up to you and said, you know, you have the idle animation and you have your run cycle, what I want to see now is a really nice transition from the idle into that run cycle. Well, that is something you would typically want to sort of handle on your own through keyframe animation, because you're able to go in there and use the animation skills, the animation techniques you know, to create a really nice, believable, appealing looking transition instead of this sort of robotic looking linear transition that Maya gives us. Now, of course, if your supervisor or director came up to you and said, I need you to make a transition in 30 minutes or an hour, then you might say, okay, what is a really good shortcut or workflow that I can use in order to achieve a good looking animation in an extremely short amount of time? So it does kind of depend on the current project that you're working on or the project that you may be simply animating yourself. Now, that being said, there are ways you can utilize the time editor to your advantage as an animator. So what we can actually do with the blend that Maya has given us between this transition is we can take this information and allow Maya to get us sort of part way there. You can see that Maya has done, again, a fairly decent job of creating a blending animation between the idle and the run. So it has done a pretty decent job. We can actually take this information that Maya has given us, and then as animators and utilizing the animation techniques and principles, we can build on the motion that Maya gives us and add more of our own type of keyframe animation to it. So let's go ahead and go over how we can utilize this information that Maya has given us. So let's go ahead, and we want to make sure that we still keep this blend happening here that Maya has given us, and we're going to go ahead and just keep the loop on there. But what we want to go ahead and do now is we want to make sure that we have the run clip and the idle clip selected. So what we're going to do is shift select both of them to make sure that they're both highlighted and both selected. And then what we're going to do is press Control and G. And that's going to group both of those animation clips into a single group. So if we go ahead and open up the group dropdown, you can see that inside the group itself, we have our idle and we have our run clip, along with the blending motion that Maya has given us. But again, we can go ahead and build on this blend and add our own animation. So to do that, let's go ahead and make sure we have this group selected. And then we're going to go up here to Bake, and we're going to choose Bake to Scene and Delete. So what this is going to do is basically take all of the animation information that we have on our idle animation, our run clip, and the blending transition that Maya has given us here, and apply it to actual keyframe animation so that we're able to edit it further if we need to. So let's go ahead and choose that option. So Bake to Scene and Delete. So what it's done is it's deleted out that group and all of those animation clips, and has now actually applied all of that animation back to our rig. So now we're simply working with keyframes again. So if we go ahead, we scrub our animation, you can see we have that exact same blending motion happening here. It looks exactly the same, and we're still getting the results that we had before. But now we've sent this back to regular keyframe animation. If we go ahead and select any one of these control objects, you can see that on our rig, we have all of the keyframes back. We also have the transition that Maya has given us. And then as animators, we can go in there and add our own creative touch to this motion and create more of a believable type of transition. Think about how that body would actually gather that energy. Maybe the character would move backward in anticipation slightly before moving into that run. But you can see by utilizing Maya's time editor to get us part way there, it only took us a couple seconds or a couple minutes to get the blend transition happening. We're able to take that blend, apply it back to keyframe animation, bake it back to our scene, and now we're able to go in there, and just like we would with any type of hand-keyed animation, we can go in here and animate this and adjust this as needed. So you can see really the great shortcut for speeding up some of the animation process for you if you are working on more of a tight deadline like that. So you can utilize a time editor to really speed up your workflow and be able to utilize some of the shortcuts that Maya does give you with the time editor. So now that we've learned all about the time editor and where we could utilize it as an animator, in the next module, we're going to take a look at some of Maya's visualize tools for our animation.